Hello everyone, Michael Jacobs. Hope everybody's having a great summer. And today we're going to talk topic 2 on is speed training for you and how you should go about it. Really, how you should go about any type of way that you're going to change the way you move, posture, stand, or change how your golf swing is. And it's the idea of understanding the difference between tension, compression, torsion. Going to give you a quick tutorial on that, and I hope it helps. Let's start with compression. Easiest way to think of compression is things are being pushed together. So let's take the wrist bone, for example. And one of the most classic things in golf has been how much we can set our left wrist, our right wrist, how much of that is changing during the swing, what happens into impact. You could watch a whole variety of that. We have our ideas on what happens. We measure it and we analyze it, obviously. But let's start with setting the wrist, so to speak. So, quick anatomy tutorial. So we have the humerus, which is the upper arm, classic elbow joint, and then we have two bones in our forearm. And I think a lot of golfers are familiar with those two bones. But let's bring it in the context of compression. So when you look at the upper arm, the lower arm, sorry, the bone that runs towards your thumb, when you look at it here and you go to grab it, it's deep in the meat here, so you don't really feel it. But when you come up by your wrist, it's very prominent. So the radius bone, which is the bone that comes through towards your thumb side, is buried here. Can't feel it, but very prominent here. The ulna bone we're real used to feeling here at the olecranon here, which is the top of the ulna bone. We're used to feeling that one. Now that's very prominent up near the elbow by where we meet the humerus. And then as we come down the arm, you could see that the ulna bone starts to disappear a little more at the meat. So the radius is more prominent here, the thumb side bone, and the ulna by the olecranon is more prominent here. So let's look at two areas of compression in just this spot. So when you go through a range of motion like this, which is called radial and ulna deviation. In golf, we call that setting your wrists, releasing your wrist. You could call it cocking your wrist, uncocking. All those terms have been used in golf. We'll use the correct terminology here of radial deviation and ulna deviation. So when we're assessing what we can do, I'm going to use this remote control, up at the top of the swing, we need to understand our range of motion in radial deviation. So this would be moving the hand towards that radius bone. And what a lot of people don't realize is you're going to have a completely different range of motion than the person standing next to you. And you're going to have a completely different range of motion possibly in just your right and your left radius bone. So let me explain to you what I mean. So at the tip of the radius bone here, there's a radial inclination, it's called. So you can see that at the top of the bone here, as it comes near the thumb side, there's a little lip or raise to the bone. And I'm going to suggest to you that everybody has a little different angle to this. And when you go to set your wrists on your swing, you're going to run into bone there. So the bones of the hand are going to start to run into the radial inclination at some point. Now, we have all type of musculature here, a lot of tendons coming through, and there could be a reason from muscular problems why somebody can't have that range of motion. That would be in the tension category. But for compression purposes here, we're going to talk about the radial inclination and how much somebody can set their wrists this way. All right. So how can you assess yours? Well, I'll give you a great example. You could use mine. And I struggled with this for a long time. And it wasn't until I dug deeper into all of these differences in human anatomy that I understood why my swing always did what it did. So if I took my left hand and I just let it sit basically in the anatomical position, and then I bring it up in front of you like this, and then I go to radially deviate, that's the range of motion I have as my bones of my hand run into the radial inclination right there. So that would be the top of my backswing in my left hand. I guarantee you someone that looks like they have a tremendous amount of wrist set, a tremendous amount more of so-called lag, is going to have a totally different location of that radial inclination. So that's my range of motion there. But what's interesting is when I go to my right hand, I have a totally different radial inclination of my right radius bone. My range of motion in the right is much greater than my range of motion in the left. So when I'm coming up to the top of the swing, for my whole entire life as a junior, working my way up, I was taking golf lessons from supposedly the best golf teacher there was, and I continually, as I came up towards the top of my swing, had trouble with my right hand creating a little too much torque at the top and really putting a little too much rotation in the club at the top, making it more difficult to bring the club down consistently. In our common vernacular now that we've developed at Jacobs 3D, I was applying too much torque at the top of the swing, and it was making my alpha force switchover difficult. We'll get into that in stage 3 of should you train for speed. But the moral of the story is, had I known that my range of motion in my right wrist to radially deviate was almost maybe even 2 to 3 times greater than my left, just because we could have different bone shapes on different sides of our body. We are not symmetrical. The goal to be symmetrical is kind of a misnomer in golf or in any type of sport. So by having more range of motion here compared to here, I am always going to have a different right wrist motion and right wrist capability in radial deviation than I'm going to have on the left. And that's just a fact. That's just, it's not right, it's not wrong, it's just my bony makeup. So if you're somebody and you're trying to copy what I see everybody doing on Instagram, trying to arch their wrist, trying to lay it down like this, without ever really assessing, I mean, we just talked about one type of compression, you're really heading down some slippery slopes on not only getting injured, not only changing your movement, but improving and not improving your golf game. And I never see any type of assessment that we do here at Jacobs 3D and we do here at my golf school in other areas of golf, especially in the speed training. Let me give you another conversation on compression. We'll stay with the arm with where we are here for today's discussion. And the ulna bone, so the ulna bone is the pinky side bone. As I said before, it's very prominent here by your elbow, right? That's the olecranon, and then it disappears a little more in the hand. But what you have here, compression-wise, is you have the olecranon, and then you have the olecranon fossa of the humerus. So that depression here, where the olecranon fits in, creates how much arm straightening or arm extension we can have. So let me give you another example of golf. We're told, and I was told as a kid, keep your left arm straight. Rhythm in a swing is keeping the club with your left arm, and you need to keep this arm straight. Well, my olecranon, when it fits into the olecranon fossa, doesn't even come close to being a straight line like that. Yet, I have students here, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of students or you've seen a lot of golfers out there, and when they let their arm extend, their lower arm can come way down and create a huge angle this way because they have more range of motion in compression at that olecranon fossa of the lower arm. So one of the first things I do is I'm assessing everybody is I make sure I understand and fully see all the different ranges of motion. And then I assess those ranges of motion in the category of tension, compression. We're going to watch a little screen recording now where I talk about and show you a little bit about tension. Now, the goal of this is just to whet your appetite with this, to get in the change of thinking. When we're starting to analyze a person to try to find out their range of movement, what's possible, both in when they walk, when they stand, and in a golf swing, and we start to look at the tension, compression, torsion aspects of the human body, what we have to do is we have to realize that where there's an imbalance might be as a result of an imbalance somewhere else. So if you follow what I'm saying there, is the fact that, like they say in body work and stuff, you never chase the pain, right? So, for example, here, when you start to look at this particular subject, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Ideal. So this would show us a typical classroom type skeleton body posture. And now when we look at what this student of mine was like in their normal posture, you start to see a ripple effect, and the major area of concern really being in the neck area. So if we zoom into this, you could see that the way that this person's head and their cervical spine has started to develop over the years, you would think that, okay, that's the site of pain. That must be the area where we need to really start to make some adjustments to this person. But what you have to understand is there's a lot going on down here. So you can see how the pelvis is forward, the knees are back, and you can see with that anterior pelvic shift forward, there's certain things that are going to start to settle in this part of the body that's going to create, through the weight of the head, etc., this type of neck posture. So you can't just look at the neck and say, okay, we have to adjust this person's neck. If we put in the musculature now around the neck, you're going to start to notice where the areas of tension are appearing. So if this was your typical classroom skeleton, and I don't want to use the word ideal, but we'll use it as a model of how this particular classroom type skeleton would have neither tension or compression restricting movement. So the way that the musculature is, the way that the bony landmarks are, there would be no compression or tension that would limit movement. Now, if we take a look at this particular student of mine, Joe, and now we look at how the musculature has developed tension-wise in his body, you're going to start to notice that range of motion here is being restricted by tension. And you can see that in the upper traps, and we're highlighting certain muscles that we would expect to have some real differences in range of motion than, let's say, a tour player who was trying to do speed training. Yet here we are as golfers just arbitrarily trying to do the same type of speed training that a tour player would do without ever really assessing what type of body we have. So if we come in more now to the midsection and we come into the pelvis here and we bring back the classroom skeleton, I want you to notice the type of tension that's taking place all in this area that definitely causes a ripple effect further up from gravity towards the head. So if we look at how Joe's tension is in his body, you're going to notice that it's even pulling the rib cage down. Now if we go down into the leg, we know that he has a little shift forward of his pelvis, and we can see how tension has created that. Now, if we look at his spine, and we look at an ideal spine, so to speak, or classroom skeleton type spine, and then we see how his has started to take shape, nobody's going to have a perfect skeleton, but what you want to understand here is that although bones are starting to run into each other here, so to speak, it's a result of tension. So if we go back to the neck and we take a look at this different type of neck angle, and we start to analyze then, how would this golfer start to move their arms? How would this golfer be able to, when we go down to the pelvis, how would this golfer be able to use so-called ground forces to help move the body throughout the swing? This person's going to have a totally different approach needed to how they develop their golf swing. So, compression, tension, there's also torsion. Now, if you looked at my left upper arm and my right upper arm, and you looked at the shapes of the bone shapes, the curves of them are never talked about. The little ridges, all the parts of the bone that make it unique, that create shape to the body. Now, everybody has, now this is just a classroom skeleton that I took apart here, and you're looking at, I believe they make these, every classroom skeleton's the same, but they make these a certain type of bend in the bones. But if you looked at bones of the same people on different sides of the body, you would see all different twists and turns in the bones. You would see all different ridges in the bones. And that's torsion. So we could call that torsion of a bone. So yeah, if I let my arm hang like this, and I find the eye of my elbow right here, and I put my finger here, and then I let my arm bend like this, I have a certain torsion, right? It could be something that's happening in my shoulder created by tension. That's another category. Or it could be something torsion-wise that sets my bone a certain way that's going to give me a different range of motion or a different appearance of the different parts of the body at the top. So before you try to go like this at the top of the swing, before you try to lay it down, before you try to really rotate different parts of your body, before you take a little thing out and try to swing it and measure how fast you're going, please assess your body. And we talked about the feet in part one. Now I'm introducing tension, compression, torsion. Obviously, we just talked about a couple parts of the body. There's an endless supply of this discussion. And in our next episode, we'll move into kinetics on the club. But I hope this just introduces you to these concepts. And you're always welcome to come out and work with me. And we work through the different portions of this analysis every day.